I don't know what hurt more, the divorce or the fact that my husband stole $500,000 from me through a text message. I wish I could say that I was prepared for what happened next, that I saw it coming. But how could I? He was my partner, my best friend, the father of our children, the man I thought I knew better than anyone else. And yet, in an instant, everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of warm, lazy day where the kids were at their friends' houses and I was finally getting a moment to myself. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, catching up on emails, when a single notification popped up on my screen. A message from Darius, my husband, who had been acting distant for weeks. At first, I thought it was just another one of his half-hearted attempts at a conversation, but when I opened the text, I froze. There were no pleasantries, no explanation, just 4 words that would change everything. "I'm done, it's over." I stared at those words, rereading them over and over, not understanding. My heart raced. "What do you mean it's over?" I texted back, trying to make sense of it, but he didn't respond. I called him. No answer. I tried again, then again. Still nothing. Panic started to set in, and I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Something wasn't right. Why wasn't he answering? What was happening? Why was everything suddenly crumbling? I waited for hours, the silence between us thick and suffocating. Then, just as I was about to lose all hope, another notification came through. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a bank alert. My hands trembled as I opened it, the words glaring at me in disbelief. Withdrawal, $500,000. Transfer complete. I felt the floor fall out from under me. $500,000 gone. Just like that. And what made it worse? It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the fact that my entire financial security had vanished without warning. It was the fact that he had stolen it from me with one swipe of a phone screen through a text message. My husband, my life partner, had taken everything from me without a second thought. I tried to think clearly, I tried to reason, but my thoughts were a blur of anger, confusion, and disbelief. How could he do this? How could someone I loved so deeply do something so cruel, so heartless? But as I sat there staring at the empty room, a surge of clarity washed over me. I wasn't just going to sit here and let him get away with it. I wasn't just going to be the victim in this story. No, I would make him regret ever thinking he could pull something like this. This was only the beginning. The betrayal hurt, but it was nothing compared to the revenge I was about to unleash. And I promise you, watching him fall from grace, it's going to be beautiful. From the outside, we had it all. The perfect life. I was a successful interior designer, well established in Atlanta's high-end market, and Darius, my husband, was the charming, sharp entrepreneur everyone admired. Together we lived in a sleek, modern loft downtown, just a few blocks from the heart of the city. The walls of our home were filled with expensive art, and our evenings were often spent hosting glamorous dinner parties, with friends and colleagues endlessly praising our seemingly perfect life. We were the couple people envied, the one everyone talked about behind their backs in hushed tones of admiration. Our vacations were always in the Caribbean, the kind of trips that made others take notice. The white sands, the private villas, the sunset views from our balconies. To the outside world, we were living the dream. But I never let anyone see what was happening behind closed doors. Darius was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Handsome, intelligent, and always the center of attention, he had this magnetic charisma that drew people in. He could charm the room effortlessly, making friends with the same ease he built his business connections. He was admired by everyone, his colleagues, his friends, even my family. He was a man who seemed to have it all together, always smiling, always on top of his game. When we first met, I was drawn to his energy, his optimism, and his ambition. He was the type of person who made you feel like you could conquer the world with him by your side. We'd talk for hours about our dreams, about the future we would build together, and how we'd support each other no matter what. He was the perfect match for me, or so I thought. As my career as an interior designer grew, so did our life. Every project I took on added to the veneer of success we were carefully constructing. I was getting clients I'd once only dreamed of, and Darius's real estate firm was thriving. He had built a name for himself in the city, and it seemed like nothing could stop him. We had everything: wealth, status, an enviable social circle, and a love that seemed like it was meant to last forever. But slowly I started noticing the little things, the cracks in the facade. At first, it was subtle. A small comment here, a slight touch of coldness there. Darius, who had always been so supportive, began to belittle my achievements. When I signed a major new client, his response wasn't one of celebration, but rather an offhanded comment about how it would be nice if I could handle more high-profile projects. It wasn't the words themselves that bothered me. It was the tone. There was something dismissive about it, something that made me feel small, as if my accomplishments didn't measure up to his expectations. He would make snide remarks about my weight after a long day of work, or comment on how I should dress a certain way to keep up with the image. My confidence, which had once been so unshakable, began to erode under the weight of his words. Every time I walked into a room, I started wondering if I was dressed the right way, if I was saying the right things, or if I was doing enough. The spark that had once fueled my passion for my career slowly started to dim, and I found myself questioning everything I did. And it wasn't just the casual jabs. There were moments when Darius outright dismissed my concerns. I'd tell him how stressful a project had been, how the client had made unreasonable demands, and instead of offering comfort or understanding, he'd wave it off with a, "It's not that big of a deal," or "You're overreacting." He always had an explanation for everything. When I would bring up something that bothered me, he'd twist it into something that made me feel like I was the problem. It was subtle at first, these little digs at my self-esteem, but they piled up. I found myself doubting my own worth, questioning whether I was doing enough, whether I was good enough. The life we had worked so hard to build, our beautiful loft, our expensive lifestyle, began to feel suffocating, as if it were all just a performance. The moments when Darius's coldness crept in became more frequent. There were days when he would come home from work and not even acknowledge me, retreating into his office with his phone in hand. He had always been a workaholic, but now it felt different. His smile seemed forced, his words lacking the warmth they once had. At times I caught him looking at his phone, his face a mask of tension. It was as though something was going on, something he wasn't telling me, and it gnawed at my insides. I kept telling myself I was overthinking things, that maybe I was just stressed from my own workload. After all, marriage isn't always smooth sailing, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. And yet I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The worst part? I still loved him. Despite all the small betrayals, I wanted to believe that we could fix it, that maybe he was just going through a rough patch. I convinced myself that the perfect life we had built together could be salvaged if I just tried harder, if I just ignored the cracks that were starting to show. But what I didn't know was that Darius was already planning his escape. And when the day came, when the text message arrived that would destroy everything I thought I knew about him, I would learn just how far his betrayal ran. It was a regular Thursday afternoon, the kind where everything feels normal until suddenly, everything isn't. I was sitting in my office going through emails about an upcoming project when my phone buzzed on the desk. I didn't think much of it, maybe a message from a client or a colleague, but when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was Darius. He had been distant all week, barely acknowledging me, but I never expected this. I unlocked the phone and stared at the message, almost as if I were trying to make sense of the words before me. "I'm done. Don't contact me. The divorce papers are on their way." The words blurred in front of my eyes as I read them again. And again. Each time they made less sense. What? I couldn't breathe. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in around me. No warning, no conversation, no sign that this was coming. How could he do this to me? To us? We had been together for nearly 8 years, years that were full of dreams, shared successes, and plans for the future, and this was how it ended. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but it felt like I was moving in slow motion, as if my body didn't quite understand what was happening. I dialed his number, my heart racing with each ring. "Pick up, Darius. Please, pick up." It went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Nothing. Panic set in like an unexpected storm crashing over me, leaving me breathless. What the hell is going on? I couldn't make sense of it. The words on the screen kept replaying in my mind, each repetition hurting more than the last. The divorce papers are on their way. The coldness of it all, the finality, the cruelty, it felt like a slap to the face. The man I had loved, who I had thought was my partner, was now a stranger sending me the most heart-wrenching message of my life. And he wasn't even there to explain himself. Without thinking, I grabbed my purse and rushed out of the office. My steps were frantic, my thoughts scattered. I needed to get home. I needed to see if this was real. By the time I arrived at our loft, the streetlights were flickering on, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. The building was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world outside had already moved on while I stood frozen in disbelief. I rushed inside, my heart thundering in my chest as I fumbled with the keys. The door creaked open, and I stepped into the apartment, expecting the familiar warmth of our home to greet me. But it didn't. It was eerily silent, far too silent for a space that had always been full of life. The first thing I noticed was how still everything was. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint murmur of traffic outside, it all felt distant. The apartment was empty. Darius's things were gone. His clothes, his expensive suits, the ones I had picked out for him, the ones he had worn to countless business meetings, were gone. The shelves that once held his favourite books were now bare. His laptop, which he always left on the desk, was missing. The space beside the bed, where he had always slept, was now vacant. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the remnants of a life we had shared. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as I walked through the apartment, each empty room cutting deeper than the last. I couldn't process what I was seeing. How could this be happening? One minute we were the perfect couple, living the perfect life, and the next, he was gone. I walked into the kitchen hoping to find something, anything that would explain what was happening. Maybe a note, maybe an explanation. But there was nothing, just the stark emptiness. My eyes wandered to the counter where a half-empty bottle of wine sat, untouched. It had been a gift from a client. The last time I saw Darius, he had promised we'd open it together that night, but it never happened. Now it seemed symbolic of everything that had unravelled in the last few hours. An unopened bottle of something that was never meant to be. I sank to the floor, my back against the cool counter, and let the tears come. I had never felt so helpless, so completely betrayed. I couldn't understand it. Why? I kept asking myself. Why would he do this without a single word, a single explanation? As the minutes stretched into hours, I sat there, unable to move, unable to speak. Every part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the silence around me was too loud. I could hear nothing but the echo of my own thoughts. In that moment, the world felt like it was spinning around me, and I was trapped in the centre, unable to escape the crushing weight of the reality I had just been forced to accept. The man I had trusted more than anyone, the man I had loved with everything in me, had just walked away. And all I was left with was a cold, heartless text message that didn't even offer a shred of explanation. If you're finding yourself shaken by this story, just wait until you see what happens next. This betrayal is only the beginning, and what unfolds will leave you speechless. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what's coming next in this roller coaster of emotions. In the days that followed Darius's sudden departure, The shock slowly began to give way to something far more dangerous: rage. But before I could even begin to process how badly I had been hurt, I was hit with the true depth of his betrayal, the financial nightmare that would leave me reeling for months to come. I tried to focus on the basics first: the bills, the immediate expenses, the things that had once been so manageable. But everything was already a mess, and nothing seemed to make sense. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? The first inkling I had of the financial devastation came when I tried to pay a credit card bill. I logged into our joint account, expecting to see the usual balance, healthy enough to cover our monthly expenses, maybe a little extra in savings for the future. But when I checked, I froze. The account balance was zero. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. There must be some mistake, I thought. I checked the second account, then a third. All gone. Over $250,000 had evaporated from our shared accounts, the funds drained without so much as a trace. My eyes moved over the screen, trying to process the numbers, trying to piece together what had happened. I quickly called the bank, desperate for answers. The representative who answered was polite but couldn't offer any immediate help. They suggested I visit a branch in person. As I arrived at the bank, my mind raced. This isn't real. There has to be some explanation. Sitting in the sterile, fluorescent-lit bank office, I explained my situation to the teller. The more I spoke, the more my stomach twisted. My voice trembled as I recounted how Darius had suddenly left without a word, leaving nothing but a cruel text and an empty apartment. The teller paused, then slowly pulled up the account information on his screen. "Mum, I'm sorry, but it looks like the majority of the funds were transferred out of the account over the past few days." "Into an offshore account?" Offshore account? The words didn't even make sense at first. I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "Offshore accounts? You mean, what, a foreign bank?" I asked, the disbelief thick in my voice. The teller nodded. "Yes, and the funds are now overseas. Without a court order, there's not much we can do at this point. We'll need to follow the proper legal process." I sat back in my chair, feeling my world crumble. Over $500,000. Gone. Just like that. How had he done this? How had he managed to siphon off everything we had built together, everything I had worked so hard for? I thought we had been partners, building a future. But now it felt like he had been playing me the entire time. Every little detail, every shared dream had been a lie. I asked about the process, hoping for something that would make me feel less powerless. The bank representative explained the next steps, but it all felt so slow. The legal process was frustratingly cumbersome. To even begin trying to get back the money, I would need to hire a lawyer, file a lawsuit, and go through lengthy international procedures to freeze the offshore accounts. The lawyer I called confirmed what the bank had said. Without a court order, the bank couldn't help. And getting a court order? That could take months, maybe even longer. I couldn't wait that long. How was I supposed to pick up the pieces in the meantime? With every passing day, the weight of the financial blow started to sink in. It wasn't just the money I had lost. It was the life I had lost. The things I had worked for, the future I had imagined, had been ripped away, not in the span of a single dramatic confrontation, but in a series of quiet, calculated moves. As the days stretched into weeks, I felt like I was drowning in paperwork, phone calls, and lawyers' consultations. But nothing seemed to move quickly enough. The frustration was unbearable. No matter how hard I tried to get things moving, no matter how many legal obstacles I fought through, I felt helpless. I had always been financially responsible, careful, methodical. I had planned for my retirement, built a savings plan, made sure we had what we needed to thrive as a couple, and in one move, Darius had erased it all. He had taken it, along with any sense of security I thought I had. I couldn't help but feel betrayed all over again. The pain of losing my marriage was one thing, but this was something entirely different. I had always trusted Darius, and now I realized that while I was pouring my heart into everything we had built, he had been quietly dismantling it from the inside out. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a financial catastrophe. He had left me stranded without a lifeline, forcing me to rebuild from the ground up, all while he walked away with everything. The fact that he could do this to me and to us left me seething with anger. I couldn't help but think about all the times I had brushed aside his behaviour, his dismissive attitude, the strange changes in his tone, the way he belittled my accomplishments. I had chalked it all up to stress or work, not realising that he was already plotting his exit. The revelation of his betrayal didn't just feel like a punch in the gut. It felt like I'd been living in a dream, and now that dream had turned into a nightmare. As I stood there staring at the balance on my phone, it was as if the entire world had collapsed in on itself. My marriage was over, my finances were destroyed, and all I could do was pick up the shattered pieces and hope I could rebuild. But the truth was, the damage had been done, and no matter what I did next, the scars of this betrayal would stay with me forever. By the time the financial devastation had begun to sink in, I knew that I needed answers. Not just about the money, but about everything. The lies, the manipulation, the strange behaviour I had brushed off as stress or momentary lapses. I had to know the full story, no matter how dark it might be. I hired a private investigator, feeling a mixture of dread and determination as I made the call. The moment I explained the situation, the investigator seemed to understand the gravity of what I was facing. His voice was calm but assured as he explained how he would track down Darius and uncover the details of his actions. I had no idea that this would be the beginning of a far more horrifying revelation. Days later, the investigator returned with his report. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope in my hands. I was bracing myself for the truth, whatever it might be, but what I read made my stomach churn. Darius had been living a double life. It wasn't just the sudden divorce, the sudden disappearance. It wasn't just the money he had stolen. Darius had been seeing another woman. Her name was Tasha, and according to the investigator's findings, she wasn't just some casual fling. She was pregnant with his child. I could hardly believe what I was reading. I had always trusted him. We had built a life together, a future. He had always told me that family was everything, and yet here I was, learning that not only had he been unfaithful, but he was going to have a child with someone else. The betrayal went beyond any of the hurtful words he had thrown at me during our marriage. It was a deep, gut-wrenching stab to the very core of everything I believed in. But as I read on, the truth became even darker. The investigator had uncovered something far more sinister. Darius had built his real estate firm on lies and deceit. It wasn't a legitimate business at all. It was a Ponzi scheme. The weight of this discovery was like a punch to the chest. Darius had been taking money from new investors to pay off older investors, all while living in luxury and leading me to believe we were on solid ground. The whole time I had trusted him to handle our finances, to build our future, and all the while, he was lying, manipulating, and stealing from everyone around him the $500,000 he had stolen from me. It wasn't just for a new life with Tasha or to cover his tracks with his affair. It was likely funneled directly into his Ponzi scheme, used to cover up the massive web of lies he had spun. He had been using me, using my trust and my money, not just to fund his own lavish lifestyle, but to prop up his fraudulent empire. I felt a wave of nausea crash over me as I continued reading. It wasn't just the affair with Tasha or the money he had stolen. It was the realization that Darius had been lying to me from the very start. Everything we had shared, every intimate moment, every future plan, it had all been a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep me in the dark while he built his house of cards. The betrayal felt like it went beyond anything I had imagined. It wasn't just a bad marriage. It was a long-running, malicious manipulation. Every smile, every I love you, every family vacation, it was all a lie. I wasn't just the victim of a cheating husband. I was the victim of a calculated, systematic betrayal where every single part of my life had been weaponized against me. As the days went on, I found myself seething with anger. It wasn't just the money I had lost or the emotional toll the affair had taken on me. It was the realization that I had been living a life where nothing was real. Darius had been playing a game the entire time, using me, the people around him, and his own business partners, all as pawns in a game that only he knew the rules to. My mind spun with thoughts of revenge. How could someone do this to another person? To lie, to manipulate, to betray so callously, all for personal gain. I had always considered myself a good judge of character, someone who could read people, who could tell when something wasn't right. But Darius had fooled me at every turn, and now I had nothing but a shattered version of the man I once thought I knew. I called the investigator again, requesting every single detail, every shred of evidence he had uncovered. I couldn't let him get away with this. But what struck me most about the entire situation was that Darius had never once thought of me as his partner, his equal. To him, I had been a stepping stone, a way to climb higher while he built a fake empire based on deceit. As I hung up the phone with the investigator, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming what was mine, about taking back control over the life I had lost. I knew I wasn't going to let him get away with it. But the road ahead was going to be long, and the battle wouldn't be easy. I had to prepare myself for the fight of my life, because this man, this person I had once loved, had proven that he was capable of anything. But it wasn't just the pain of betrayal I had to overcome. It was the realization that I had been blind to everything he was doing. The truth, as ugly as it was now out in the open. And I would not let him destroy me. I would make sure that justice was served and that he would face the consequences for everything he had done. I was no longer the woman who sat helplessly, overwhelmed by the shock of betrayal. Something had shifted in me. The despair had turned into something sharper. Rage. But not just rage. Determination. I wasn't going to let Darius get away with what he had done. If he thought he could break me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I started by gathering everything, every bank statement, every email, every shred of evidence I could find. I combed through our financial records, searching for any trail he might have left behind, anything that would prove the full extent of his betrayal. The investigator's report was gold, but I knew I needed more. I couldn't let him slip through the cracks. Not this time. Next, I contacted a lawyer. The divorce wasn't going to be simple. It couldn't be. I wasn't just fighting for my share of the assets, I was fighting for justice. I had to start the divorce proceedings, but I also needed to make sure Darius faced the full consequences of his actions. I was going to file charges for financial fraud, and I wanted to make sure he understood just how deep his lies ran. This wasn't just about getting back what he had stolen from me. It was about punishing him for everything he had done. But as I sat in the lawyer's office, my mind shifted from the personal to the strategic. I wasn't just going to let Darius lose his money and his reputation. I wanted to destroy the empire he had built, his web of lies, deceit, and manipulation. I wanted the world to see him for the fraud he was. That was my goal now. He had used me as a pawn for years, but now I was going to be the one pulling the strings. Then I remembered something. Darius had always talked about an investor named Victor, someone important in the business world. Victor had been a part of Darius's real estate dealings, but he had no idea of the man's true nature. Darius had painted a picture of a powerful, untouchable figure in the world of finance, and I knew that if I could get to Victor, I could dismantle everything Darius had built. I set my sights on Victor. I tracked him down and arranged a meeting under the guise of a potential investment opportunity. I knew I had to play it carefully. I couldn't let him know who I really was at first. I had to get him to trust me, to believe that I had something valuable to offer. When I walked into that meeting, I wasn't just a woman scorned anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. The pieces were all falling into place. I could feel the power shift. Darius had spent years building a life based on lies, but now I was going to take it all away. And this was just the beginning. The day of my meeting with Victor felt like the moment the storm was finally going to break. Every decision, every step I had taken up, until then, had led me to this very point. I could feel the weight of it pressing on me as I stood outside the sleek glass building where Victor's office was. It was a place for high rollers, a world I'd never truly belonged to, but today I was about to change that. I had been playing this carefully, feeding Victor just enough to draw him in without tipping my hand too early. He was a man who valued power, status, and trust. The idea that someone like Darius, someone he'd trusted, was a fraud was unthinkable. But that's exactly why I had to go through with this. I wasn't just going to get back at Darius, I was going to take away his influence, his allies, and his reputation, everything that had made him untouchable. Victor greeted me with his usual cold charm, all smiles and handshakes. But I could tell there was something beneath the surface. He was always calculating, sizing me up. I had to keep my guard up, but as the meeting went on, I felt my confidence growing. "I've been following Darius's work for years," I began, keeping my tone casual, though inside I was ready to burst. "He's built quite the reputation for himself, hasn't he?" Victor leaned back in his chair, nodding. "He's a smart guy. Big plans for the future. Why do you ask?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "Because everything he's told you, everything he's built, it's all been a lie." Victor furrowed his brow, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, my voice steady but filled with purpose. "Darius has been running a Ponzi scheme. He's been using new investors' money to cover old debts, and in the process, he's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from me and countless others. The firm you've been investing in, it's a fraud." Victor sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. "Are you saying you have proof of this?" I didn't hesitate. I slid a folder across the table, the documents inside crisp and damning. "I've hired a private investigator. I've got bank statements, emails, and evidence that Darius has been lying to everyone, including you. He's been stealing from his investors to fund his own lifestyle, and the money he took from me was funneled into covering up his scam. He's been living a double life with another woman and a child on the way." Victor stared at the folder for a long moment, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to grab it, but he held back. I could feel the storm brewing inside him. I knew he had no idea what was coming for him, and I could see the wheels turning in his head as he processed what I had just laid out for him. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and growing anger. "Are you telling me that all this time Darius has been conning me? I've invested millions with him. How could I have been so blind?" His voice was low, but the fury was unmistakable. "I'm afraid you've been played just like the rest of us," I said quietly, but there was no sympathy in my voice. "And I think you deserve to know what kind of man you've been supporting." Victor ran a hand through his hair, his face turning red as the reality of the situation sank in. The room felt charged, heavy with the tension that had been building up since I walked in. I could see that he was furious, but it wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. The kind of betrayal that made people do terrible things. "I need to do something about this," Victor muttered, more to himself than to me. His eyes met mine again, and in them I saw a flicker of respect. Or maybe fear. "What do you want from me?" I leaned in, my voice steady. "I don't want anything from you, Victor. But I do want to see Darius fall. You can help me with that." Victor looked at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls." The meeting ended shortly after that, but the damage had already been done. I had planted the seed of doubt in Victor's mind, and now it was his turn to make the next move. That night, as I sat in my apartment, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I knew it was time for the next step. I wasn't just going to let Victor take care of everything. I had my own allies to call upon. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of my friend Emily, a journalist I had known for years. She had always had a nose for a good story, and I knew she would be able to take this and run with it. When she answered, I wasted no time. "Emily, you won't believe the story I've got for you." I spent the next hour telling her everything: Darius's Ponzi scheme, his double life, the stolen money, and the evidence I had gathered. Emily was silent at first, taking it all in. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you have proof?" "I have everything," I said, my voice unwavering. "Bank statements, emails, the investigator's report, everything." She didn't hesitate. "I'll get this published. You'll see the fallout tomorrow." The next morning, the story hit the headlines. Darius's world began to crumble. The headlines screamed across every news outlet. Interior designer's husband exposed as Ponzi scheme mastermind, stole over $500,000 from wife and investors. As the days passed, I watched in satisfaction as Darius's life spiraled out of control. His business partners turned on him, his investors demanded their money back, and the media tore him apart. His carefully constructed world of lies had come crashing down, and all I had to do was pull the right strings. The sweet taste of victory was almost too much to bear. I had done it, I had taken back control, but I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The fallout from the story's publication was immediate and brutal. Within days, Darius's world, the empire he had so carefully built through lies and manipulation, began to crumble. The investors who had once trusted him, who had poured their money into his so-called real estate ventures, quickly pulled out. His firm, which had seemed so invincible, was now nothing more than a sinking ship. The media frenzy escalated, exposing every corner of his fraudulent activities. It wasn't long before Darius's name was synonymous with dishonesty and betrayal. His clients, colleagues, and former friends distanced themselves from him as the truth came to light. The phone calls and emails asking for their investments to be returned came in a steady stream. In a panic, Darius tried to salvage whatever he could, but it was too late. The people who had once admired him were now outraged by the revelations of his deceit. The weight of his crimes was undeniable, and his empire, the one he had built by using others, was unraveling at an alarming pace. Then the legal consequences hit. Darius was arrested on charges of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. As the investigation continued, more details of his Ponzi scheme were uncovered, revealing the extent of his manipulation. The stolen $500,000 from me wasn't just a fraction of his criminal activities. It was only the beginning. The courts began to take action, and Darius was swiftly caught in the web of his own making. His once pristine reputation was now shattered, and he found himself on the wrong side of the law. The most unexpected consequence of all was Tasha. It wasn't just the betrayal of her being involved in his life. She too had been deceived, but in the end, she couldn't handle the weight of the scandal. She walked away, leaving Darius alone in the wreckage of his life. She took their unborn child with her, disappearing from his life as quickly as she had entered it. Darius was left with nothing. Not his woman, not his wealth, and certainly not his freedom. It was a bitter pill for him to swallow, but it was also one of the most satisfying aspects of his downfall. His double life had cost him everything. Meanwhile, my life was moving in a different direction. While Darius's world continued to burn, I began to rebuild mine. I had spent years working tirelessly to make a name for myself in the world of interior design, but now I was determined to take it to the next level. With the settlement from the divorce and the financial security I had reclaimed, I launched my own design firm. I was no longer tied to Darius's shadow. Now it was my time to shine. The firm started small, but my reputation grew quickly. Word spread about my innovative designs and my ability to turn even the most ordinary spaces into extraordinary works of art. Clients who once questioned my ability because of my association with Darius were now seeking me out. I had become a force in the industry, and my success felt like the ultimate act of defiance. Every project I completed felt like a small victory over the life I had once known with Darius. It was as though every design choice, every room I transformed was my way of taking back the control that had been stolen from me. The pain of the betrayal slowly faded as the rewards of my hard work started to accumulate. I was no longer just the woman who had been cheated on and robbed. Now I was a successful entrepreneur in my own right. Looking back, I realized that revenge had never been about hurting Darius as much as it was about empowering myself. His world had collapsed because of his lies, and mine had flourished because I chose to rise above the betrayal. I had taken back what was mine, my life, my dignity, and my future, and in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. As I stood in my office, surrounded by the success I had built from scratch, I couldn't help but smile. Darius had made a huge mistake, and now I was living proof that when you take control and fight back, the comeback is always sweeter than the betrayal. As time passed, the echoes of Darius's betrayal began to fade. Despite the destruction he had caused in my life, I had rebuilt myself. But Darius, on the other hand, found himself locked away behind bars, facing the consequences of his actions. He tried to reach out, sending letters from prison, each one more desperate than the last. He begged for forgiveness, pleading for a chance to explain himself, but I never responded. I had nothing to say to him anymore. He had no place in my life, and I had moved on. His words meant nothing to me. His apologies were hollow, and his regrets were too little. Too late. I had already taken control of my own destiny. There was nothing he could say that would change the fact that he had shattered everything we once had, and for that, he had to face the consequences. The true revenge wasn't just about making him suffer. It was about ensuring that he paid for what he did. And that was exactly what happened. I had come out of this experience stronger, more independent, and more successful than I had ever imagined. My business was thriving, and I had found peace in my own skin again. The scars from my past remained, but they no longer defined me. I had created a life filled with purpose and satisfaction, one that had nothing to do with Darius or his manipulations. Looking back, I realized that my revenge wasn't about ruining him. It was about building something better for myself. In the end, that was the greatest payback of all. I had won, not because I had destroyed him, but because I had rebuilt my own happiness and future from the rubble of the past. If you think Darius got exactly what he deserved, hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. How would you have gotten revenge on him? And don't forget to subscribe to Nexus of Revenge for more jaw-dropping stories of betrayal, payback, and justice. Stick with us, because you won't want to miss what's coming next.